I asked AI about the terrifying truth behind the haunted Annabelle doll. I never should have opened that door. My heart raced as I pushed it, the creaking hinges a haunting sigh into the dark. The room was cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt. A frigid stillness wrapped around me, wrapping tighter as I stepped inside. Shadows danced in the flickering light. Whispers fluttered around, like ghostly fingers grazing my skin. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity held me captive. I was just a regular person, lost in my mundane routine. Every day felt like the same boring grind until one fateful afternoon when boredom nudged me toward that cursed doll. I had stumbled upon a mind-boggling video about Annabelle, the infamous doll, which felt like pure fiction at first. They claimed she was possessed, a vessel for a malevolent spirit that didn't just sit on a shelf. No, this thing came alive, moving through the shadows of a dimly lit room. I laughed it off, like everyone else. What's a doll compared to real life? But as I watched, an icy dread filled me. Sitting in my cramped apartment, my senses buzzed. The air felt thick, almost electric, as strange noises began echoing from somewhere within the walls. A scratch here, a thump there. Was it just my imagination? I quickly shook my head, trying to dispel those creeping vibes. But then came the lingering scent, burnt and metallic, clawing at the back of my throat. I felt sweat bead on my brow. I was alone, but the hairs on my arms stood as if someone or something was watching me. Now I was on the edge, teetering between disbelief and fear. The video detailed how people who encountered Annabelle experienced inexplicable horrors, vivid nightmares, accidents, even the loss of loved ones. I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't help but glance at my own reflection in the dark glass of the window, and for a moment, my face morphed into something grotesque, mirroring my panic. I blinked and it was gone, but doubt settled in like a weight on my chest. Suddenly, the television blinked off, plunging me into silent darkness. My heart drummed louder, echoing against the walls. This wasn't normal. I had to get out, but my feet felt glued to the floor. A sense of impending doom wrapped around me, squeezing tighter. Was it the doll? I pictured her, sitting there with a twisted grin, eyes glinting with malevolence. A wooden monster watching me from across the room. And then it happened. A sharp clatter rang out from somewhere inside the apartment. My throat tightened, fear swallowing my breath. I glanced toward the sound, heart thundering in my ears. Was the doll somehow involved? My mind raced with questions, a whirlwind of horror and disbelief. What was about to happen next? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence enveloped me like a shroud, thick and suffocating. My pulse raced, each second an eternity while I stood frozen, listening for another sound, another sign that I wasn't alone. It felt like the walls themselves were watching, closing in with a predatory hunger. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on the edge of the rug, barely steadying myself before I fell. In that instant, the air turned electric, and a low, wet sound echoed from beyond the kitchen. My instincts screamed for me to leave, to flee, but the terror morphed into a dark curiosity as I slowly tiptoed towards the source. My throat felt dry, constricted as I moved closer, each step a painful reminder that something terrible awaited beyond that door. I clenched my jaw, willing my heart to stop its frantic pounding. The kitchen light flickered, casting erratic shadows that twisted across the floor. I squeezed my eyes shut, a futile attempt to block out the fear, then thrust my hand onto the cool doorknob. With a deep breath, I turned it, the metal cold against my palm. As I pulled the door open, a gust of frigid air poured out. The unmistakable smell of decay clawed at my senses. My stomach rolled. Peering inside, I was confronted with a scene that stole my breath. The kitchen, once familiar, was now chaotic. Cabinet doors stood ajar, as though flung open by unseen hands. On the floor was a shattered glass bowl, the remnants resembling glistening shards of ice in the dim light. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. It felt as if the atmosphere shifted, thickening with anticipation, forming a living entity. That's when I saw it, a single white thread stretched across the floor, glittering in eerie moonlight, leading straight to the corner beneath the sink. It was strange, almost absurd, yet a terrible pull urged me forward. What was the thread doing there? I crouched, my fingers trembling as I reached out to touch it. The moment I made contact, a jolt of static electricity surged through my body, and I recoiled, gasping. Suddenly, images flashed in my mind. A girl, her laughter, bright and innocent. The scene darkened as I witnessed shadowy figures lurking, jumbled whispers of fear, cries of desperation that echoed in the hollow of my spirit. I was losing myself in this panicked reverie when a shrill sound cut through the madness, wrenching me back to reality. The sound was unmistakable, a child's scream, more piercing and heart-wrenching than anything I'd heard. It seemed to rise from the very walls, piercing the fabric of my sanity. I bolted upright, searching for the source, dread coiling around me like a vengeful serpentine. Had it come from the doll? In that instant, a shadow shifted in the corner of my eye. I turned sharply. My breath hitched at the sight before me. Annabelle was no longer sitting on the shelf. She was gone, vanished into the darkness. Cold sweat dripped from my brow as an oppressive silence fell over the room. I scanned the kitchen, my soul screaming at me to leave, to run as far away as I could. But the screams persisted, growing louder, inexorable, echoing through the corridor of my mind, pulling me deeper into the abyss of hysteria. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The doll lay sprawled at the foot of a cracked mirror, a once opulent reflection now fractured and distorted. I took a hesitant step closer, heart hammering violently against my ribcage. But as I approached, the doll's head tilted unnaturally, a preternatural grin splitting its painted face. A sharp wind blew through the room, snuffing out the light. Everything went black. The world tilted on its axis. The last thing I heard was the echo of that terrible laughter, shrill and manic, reverberating in the darkness. And then, a voice whispered straight into my mind, chilling me to the bone. You shouldn't have opened that door. As I fumbled desperately for the doorknob, the whispers intensified, melding into an inescapable cacophony of terror. I finally grasped the handle, yanking the door open only to find it led into an abyss far worse than the room I had just left. An eternal night awaited, filled with unspeakable horrors. I stepped through, not knowing if I would return. Caught between two realms, the darkness beckoned, promising revelations worse than death. As I turned back one last time, the doll's eyes glinted brightly in the shadows, and with a final breath, the door slammed shut behind me. The air thickened with an unsettling, palpable dread that sent a shiver spiraling down my spine. I stood suspended in that liminal space between worlds, swallowed by the dark. It clung to me, wrapping around my limbs like a predator preparing to pounce. From the void, whispers thrummed at the edges of my consciousness, echoing fragments of wordless fears and the laughter of forgotten children that I hesitated, my own breath sounding foreign in the heavy silence. And then, just as suddenly, I was pulled forward, deeper into the shadows. A creeping sensation enveloped me, a sense that I was being watched not by eyes that measured my existence, but by something sinister, a presence that hungered and glutted itself on the despair that radiated from my very being. The landscape shifted beneath my feet, the ground morphing from solid wood to something softer, pulpy, like flesh. I recoiled but lost my balance, plunging forward onto an uneven surface that stank of rot. I looked down to see an array of grotesque forms writhing beneath my fingers. Disembodied faces flickered aimlessly among them, their mouthless screams reverberating through the darkness, clawing at my sanity. Welcome, a familiar voice slithered through the void, causing my heart to stutter. It was the same voice that had whispered to me just moments before, now laced with amusement. Have you come to play? I spun to find myself back in the kitchen, but something was different. The once familiar confines were warped, twisted into an abhorrent distortion. The walls writhed, pulsating with the rhythm of concealed hearts, and the flickering lights cast just enough shadow to let me see that the cabinet doors had turned into grotesque mouths, perpetually opening and closing, mimicking laughter. "You can't escape," the voice taunted from every corner. I stumbled backward, pressing against something cold, a mirror that reflected not just my terrified visage, but something creeping just behind me, lingering beyond the edges of reality. The doll was there, still grinning, but now its eyes glowed with an eerie, relentless hunger. I tore my gaze from it, wrenching my attention away to regain control of my breathing. "Get out," I whispered hoarsely to myself, searching for an exit through the warp of this twisted realm. The dormy escape loomed ominously at the end of the hallway, but the air felt heavy, charged with anticipation, as if unseen witnesses awaited my next move. Instinct nudged me forward, nudging through the mist of panic and despair that tried to drag me back. I sprinted, vivid shadows clawing at my heels, lungs straining as I neared the threshold. But just as my fingers grazed the cool doorknob, a sickening crack erupted from behind me. I turned instinctively. The mirror had shattered into a million appalling shards, each piece distorting the reality around me. I felt, rather than saw, the shapes of restless spirits breaking through, filling the air with their torment. I could hear their mouths move, the silence a different kind of scream, and one voice rose above the others, shrill and desperate. "You must listen." I could feel my heart racing, on the precipice of terror beyond what I could comprehend. I turned back to the door, but it began to dissolve, the wood splintering into glimmers of darkness that seeped away like a lost dream. "No," I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat. From the wreckage emerged the doll, its empty gaze now fixated on me, burning with purpose. The laughter resonated once more, deep and rich with malice. "You must stay?" it cooed, the words curling around me like smoke, intoxicating and suffocating. "You opened the door. You can never leave." With a last surge of panic, I launched myself against what was left of the doorframe, but I felt myself freeze under the weight of its potency. The last vestiges of the connection to the outside world faded completely, and just as darkness seemed ready to swallow me whole, a sudden crash rattled through the air. There, emerging through the rift of shadows behind the doll, a child drenched in blood and shadows gestured desperately to me. "Behind you," it shrieked, and I twisted around, only to find the melted faces coalescing into one grotesque figure, a looping reminder of my fear. My scream was drowned out by the cacophony, and as I grappled with the figures closing in, the last thing I saw was the doll raising a delicate finger, beckoning me closer into its malevolent embrace. In that moment, my world spiraled out, the shadows engulfing me completely. The echo of that child's voice faded into nothingness as darkness consumed me, and in the oppressive silence, I felt Annabelle's grin widen, whispering sweetly, "You should have stayed away." The silence clawed at my senses, a thick, suffocating presence that rendered me immobile. It pressed heavily against my chest, as though a myriad of unseen hands sought to restrain me, suffocating any remnants of defiance that flickered within. Annabelle's laughter echoed, warping into a horrid symphony that played on every nerve ending, sending shudders through my bones. I was submerged in a realm where time and reason twisted with grotesque delight. "Where am I?" I gasped, yet the question fell into the oppressive gloom and shattered like brittle glass. In that pocket of darkness, I could feel the warmth of blood-slicked floors under my palms, visceral and pulsing like a heart beneath the skin. It was a womb of despair, feeding off the thick aroma of fear that soaked the walls. Suddenly, I was not alone. Figures emerged from the semblance of shadows, childlike silhouettes with hollow eyes that gazed at me with an insatiable hunger. Each pair of eyes drew closer, their restless whispering swirling around me, a chorus of lost souls trapped in an eternal dance of sorrow. The bloodied child emerged again, stepping lightly through the throng, its sepulchral face marred with grief. "You have to understand," it implored, its voice weaving through the ribbons of darkness. "They can't be trusted." "Not her." "Who?" I stammered, my breath erratic as I dared to shift my gaze back to the doll where it loomed, now more animated, eyes glistening with malicious anticipation. The moment felt stretched beyond comprehension, as if I were being drawn into a warped mirror, the reflection of a reality that loathed to accept me. Then, I felt it. Cold tendrils wrapping around my ankles, the smooth, rolling caress of the floor rising as though seeking to devour me whole. Panic surged, primal and animalistic, propelling me to flee, but the walls constricted like the jaws of a beast. "It won't let you go," the child screamed, its face twisting in anguish. "Let go," I cried, wrenching myself free from the grip of sorrowful tendrils that slithered into my skin like barbed hooks. The child pointed towards a flickering light at the far end of the room, a beacon nestled between grotesque mouths that moaned and twisted. I willed myself to move, heart hammering as I felt Annabelle's watchful gaze sear into the back of my head. With every ounce of strength, I barreled toward the light, the whispers ricocheting around me. "Don't go. You belong to us," they screeched, the cacophony piercing like sharp knives ensnaring my mind. I could feel the malignance thickening in the air, feeding off my fear, and behind me, I could hear the shuffling of countless feet, shadows merging into something vast and terrible. The flickering bulb neared, illuminating a semblance of hope, a shimmering portal in which sanity echoed faintly. Yet there was something sinister in its glow, to a promise of eternal captivity veiled in deceptive comfort. As I reached out for it, a cold hand grasped my wrist, freezing me in place. "Stop. You don't want." The child's warning sliced through me, but was doused beneath the overwhelming weight of a voice that rasped from all directions. "You are chosen, just as we were." In a desperate act, I ripped my arm free from the child's grip and lunged for the light. As I crossed the threshold, a horrid shriek erupted, a wailing lament that shook the very foundations of the space I vaulted into. The sensation of tearing through fabric, light versus darkness, burned through me, and for a moment, I felt weightless, suspended between realms. But that moment was fleeting. The light flickered violently as I emerged on the other side, crashing down. My body collided with cold, damp earth, jagged rocks, and undergrowth cutting into my skin, making me painfully aware that I was no longer in the same space. Dread slithered through my mind. Darkness yawned around me like the maw of some unfathomable beast, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to loom with sinister intent. The air reeked of decay, and the oppressive fog thickened. Shadows shifted just beyond my periphery, promising a torment I could hardly begin to comprehend. Heart racing, I scrambled to stand, mind racing with questions, with intermittent glimpses of Annabelle's grinning face searing into my thoughts. Then, I heard it again, a child's sob, soft and chilling, drifting from the depths of the woods. "Help us, you must help us," the voice pleaded, laced with sorrow and a hint of something darker. The call intertwined with something familiar, a part of my memory I couldn't grasp, a forgotten name floating just beyond the surface of my consciousness. With instinct overriding caution, I stumbled toward the heart of the woods. As the shadows embraced me once more, I could feel something waiting, something darker than my own dread, and with each step, I descended further into the depths where secrets, far older than my understanding, waited to be revealed. Just as I stepped past a gnarled tree, I heard the soft whisper of laughter unfurling in the darkness behind me, growing louder and more hideous by the moment. The wind carried a warning not meant for my ears, but just as I turned, the laughter ceased in a deathly hush and the trees shifted, closing around me as if sealing a pact. And in the midst of that silence, a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the shadows, searing with the promise of nightmares. "You really should have listened," a voice purred, all humor twisted into cruel malice. "Now you're ours forever." The forest echoed with their glee as the darkness swallowed me whole, and once again, I was left questioning if I had the strength to escape the binds of this accursed night. The forest pulsated with an alien heartbeat, the very ground vibrating beneath my feet as I stood before those glowing eyes that pierced my soul. Fear coiled tighter around me, and I choked on my breath, each inhalation heavy with the stench of rot mingling with something sweeter and more putrid that clung to the air like a heavy fog. The voice continued, its tone wrapped in a serpentine caress that made my skin prickle. "You think you can escape?" It laughed softly, a sound that burrowed into my mind. Just as I began to make sense of my predicament, the laughter shifted, swelling into a chorus that echoed through the labyrinth of trees surrounding me. It was as if a multitude of voices had woven a web of terror designed specifically for my unraveling. "You haven't realized yet, have you?" The voice cooed, and the entity prowled closer, shadows pooling beneath its form. "You're already one of us." Suddenly, the ground split open with a gaping maw, and horrific visages began to emerge from the abyss. Ghostly figures twisted and writhed, their faces contorted with despair and rage, echoes of the lost souls from the room I had just fled. They wailed, reaching out with skeletal hands, grasping for something that would never return, their eyes sunken and dull, void of hope. Annabelle, my lips trembled as the name fell from my mouth, a desperate calling for clarity, for sanity in this madness. Yet the figure before me merely grinned, lips peeling back to reveal rows of jagged teeth stained with the remnants of past crackling laughter. "Do you really think she's the one controlling you? Oh, sweet child, she was just the beginning. Her power extends far beyond this treacherous wood. She invites her friends to play, and they yearn for new lives, fresh minds." A motion of the glowing eyes beckoned, and the ethereal figures slithered closer, their cries merging into a cacophony of torment that drowned out my fears. "You are the perfect new addition, aren't you? You see, they're hungry. But so are you, no," I shouted, clawing backward, dread clawing at my chest. But the trees encircled me, their branches gnarled and trapping me in this hellish playpen. Behind them, the forest moved, every rustle amplifying the torment of those specters that clamored for release. Each heartbeat felt in tune with their pleas, rhythmically synced with the simmering dread that sat heavy within me. Then, I sensed a cold breeze slicing through the tangled branches, mingled with the fragrant decay filling the air, as if the forest itself had sighed in response to my anguish. I dropped to my knees, fingers clawing at the loamy earth, searching for sanctuary or the answer that would end this horror. A flash of light sparked behind my eyelids, casting images of white-knuckled terror in bright flashes, a tumultuous tempest swirling within my mind. As I opened my eyes, I glimpsed Annabelle's doll once more, her painted lips caressed in a twisted smile. The chill washed over me anew. For a heartbeat, I heard the faint thrum of an ominous rhythm, almost like whispering lullabies of the damned, calling, both entrancing and repelling. It hummed in my veins, aching to envelop me, to stretch tendrils of acceptance toward the legion shrouded in shadow. "Join us," the ethereal chorus echoed, overwhelming me as they lured me into their fold. "We promise to keep you safe, to help you embrace the darkness. It's your destiny." With each word, I could feel the creeping poison pulling at the seams of my existence. My breath became unsteady with the weight of such an invitation, a sweet release laced with cruelty. But as dread filled me, a flicker of rebellion sparked. "No." I tore from my knees, surging back against the encroaching darkness. "I am not yours." The glow of those eyes flashed bright, furious with their malice. "You resist for now, but all will be lost. Hope is a mirage, and we've seen generations turn to ash begging for mercy." And just as it seemed reality would swallow me whole, the very roots of the trees began to slither forward like serpents, coiling around my legs, tightening their hold as I fought against the encroaching horror. Then, a distant scream erupted, familiar, filled with panic, echoing through the tangled branches, a sound that resonated deep within my marrow. It shattered the illusion of solitude, awakening a primal defense I never knew I possessed. It was Annabelle's laugh, warped and sinister, as ancient as the woods themselves, circling around the ether, fueling my desperation. Before I could process what was happening, the ground trembled violently, and a deep rumble resonated through the earth. "You think she cares?" The voice hissed with rising fury, and the darkness seemed to thicken around me, pressing in from all sides. "Look deeper, and you will find what she truly is." And just as the shadows lunged to consume me once more, reality fractured. A gaping fissure opened in the ground, and endless screams poured forth, whispers of the damned flooding the air, a swirling tempest of anguished souls. In that moment, as the very fabric of the forest began to peel away, a vision sparked in my mind, a glimpse of truth caught in a storm of distortion. "Help us!" The screams cried in unison, but it was all a blur, melding with my screams of resistance. "Do you even know what you're fighting?" In the heart of the chaos, a grinning doll lifted high amidst the wrath, beckoning a darkness that threatened to tug me under. And in the swirling maelstrom of fear and despair, I realized one fractal thought. I wasn't just fleeing from the darkness. I was standing at the precipice of an abyss that was intricately, horrifyingly entwined with who I truly am. The moment froze. A raw silence crashed through the tumult as I teetered on the edge. Then, from deep within the cacophony, a scream pierced through the haze, crystal clear and resonant, that of a chilled voice striking a nerve embedded deep within. "Help us," it echoed again, this time breaking the illusion. And for one chilling instant, everything stopped, and then I saw Ida flicker beneath the surface of the ground, a tremor rippling through reality itself, heralding a new horror that watched and waited, claws ready for its next victim. As darkness closed in, and the laughter crescendoed again, I faced the truth. I had awakened something far worse than I could have ever imagined. A horror that hungered not only for my body, but for my very soul. I stumbled backward, hands searching for anything to hold on to. But as I turned, I found myself face to face with Annabelle, her gaze dazzlingly bright in the creeping darkness. "Why did you leave us? Didn't you want to play?" she whispered, and the last vestiges of my sanity melted away, slipping beyond my grasp as the shadows took me once more. The forest twisted around me, an unrelenting wave of despair washing over my senses. Shadows slithered through the underbrush, their whispering voices echoing with the secrets of those who had come before me. The luminous gaze of Annabelle bore into my soul, each blink a tempest of emotion, leaving me feeling as if I stood on the precipice of insanity. The disarray of screams and laughter merged with sobs that reverberated off the trees, creating an unholy symphony of madness. "Why did you leave us? Didn't you want to play?" The question bathed me in a chilling embrace, as if each word was another tendril of darkness curling around my chest. I struggled against it, desperate to break free, yet every fiber of my being now resonated with the will of this cursed entity. My heart raced at her proximity. The once comforting familiarity of her presence twisted into something monstrous. With the earth quaking beneath me, I felt the forest alive, pulsating with an ancient rage. It seethed and whispered, urging me to succumb to the grip of despair. I remembered the stories, the warnings surrounding the Doll, mysterious deaths, families torn apart, the lingering dread of something far more sinister than childhood games. And now, here I was, at the center of it all, eyes locked with the embodiment of that malevolence, a puppet for forces far beyond my comprehension. "No," I gasped, forcing the word out as I stumbled away from her. "I won't play your game." Each stride was labored, my surroundings warping and swirling like a macabre painting, the vibrant greens bleeding into a sickening black. But Annabelle's laughter rang through the trees, more intoxicating than a fever dream. They all laughed, the wretched souls trapped in the forest, weaving a spell of despair that tightened around me like a noose. "You must embrace your darkness. Join us, and find peace beneath the shadows." With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal of the locket I always carried, a remnant of happier days, a bonded tether to reality. As I clutched it, something flickered within, a light desperate to ignite against the encroaching darkness. But it gave me no comfort. I felt the hollowness growing within me, a gnawing emptiness that would consume me if I fell any deeper. "Unite with us," Annabelle crooned, each word dripping with thinly veiled malice. She stepped closer. "Will you truly forsake your family? Your friends? Are they worth more than the gift of true power?" A shudder swept through me, and I clutched the locket tightly, the faint outline of a face glimmering beneath the dim light of the moon. It was my sister Zelly, the echo of her laughter, a memory sewn tightly into my heart. The thought of her brought clarity, a flicker of strength igniting within the overwhelming gloom. "Stay away," I screamed, throwing the locket at the ground, and with an electrifying blast of light, it shattered, scattering shards like bitter promises across the forest floor. A wave of raw energy expanded outward, temporarily banishing the shadows that lunged towards me. The cacophony of screams dulled, replaced by an eerie stillness, but it was short-lived. Annabelle's eyes blazed with fury as they illuminated the darkness, and the laughter around me turned venomous, morphing into a frantic chorus of rage. "You dare defy the power we offer? You are ours. You always were." As the shadows recoiled momentarily, I felt the earth beneath my feet tremble again. I stumbled, catching my breath, poised on the brink of the abyss where despair flourished. Frantically searching for a way out, I spotted a faint clearing through the chaotic branches, tainted light filtering through like an ethereal warning. Every ounce of fear propelled me forward, pushing aside the hands reaching from the darkness. I sprinted towards that glimmering refuge, the chance of the damned clawing at my heels, but the tendrils of shadows surged, determined to drag me back. Leaves snapped underfoot as I darted through the trees, adrenaline surging through my veins, but the ground roiled like an angry sea. Resisting my flight, just as I neared the clearing, a blood-curdling shriek erupted behind me, and I turned, my heart plummeting. The trees contorted, their bark warping into monstrous visages taunting me, faces of those lost to the darkness flashing before my eyes. "You cannot leave," Annabelle's voice echoed, amplified to match the chaos around me. "We are not done." In that moment, I felt a presence surge from the depths of the forested dark entity, greater than any horror I had faced yet, materializing from the very shadows that ensnared me. It slithered through the air, an amalgamation of horror, half-formed faces grasping at the edges of reality, their mouths forming silent screams that painted my heart with icy dread. The shadows coalesced, swallowing the path before me, melding into a single creaturia pulsating mass of limbs and mouths that writhed with insatiable hunger. A terrible realization gripped me. It wasn't just searching for a body to claim, but for something far more vital, a fragment of my very essence, a piece of who I was. "Help us," echoed in the distance again, the voice of a child merging with the storm of madness. The creature surged forward, and my heart raced as I felt its cold touch dance across the back of my neck. With a roar, I turned toward the glimmering light of the clearing, its warmth inviting and terrifying at once. "No," I screamed, pushing forward with every ounce of will. "You will not take me." But as I crossed the threshold, the light flickered and dimmed. Annabelle's laughter surged to a horrifying crescendo, as shadows twisted and coiled at my feet, dragging me back. I was torn between two worlds, caught in a battle between light and darkness. And just as I believed I could escape, I felt a jagged edge grazing my skin, a touch that pierced my very being. That I turned one last time, staring into the abyss of life and death and eternity, where Annabelle's visage flickered, dangerously close. "You wanted to play," she whispered, and as I fell into the light, I understood the bitter truth. The last thing I saw was the darkness swallowing the light and the echoes of 1,000 screams reverberating around me. Then everything went black. The darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud, and for a pulse-stopping moment, I floated in a void of silence, my senses dulled and numbed. I yearned for the familiar sense of earth and air to ground me, but they had all evaporated like mist under the sun. Panic clawed at my throat as I fought against the crushing pressure of oblivion. Suddenly, a visceral memory flicked back to me, a fleeting image of Ellie, her laughter ringing bright through a sunlit meadow as she spun in circles, her hair shimmering like spun gold. But that vision shattered, replaced by the pleading, shadowed eyes that stared into the abyss with eternal sorrow. I was adrift, and the weight of lost love and despair was anchored to my soul. That a sound broke the silence. A soft, persistent tapping echoed all around me, growing louder and more frantic. It felt like the pounding of a heart, heavy and relentless, sinking with an insistent whisper, a name, my name. Bree Bree. A surge of cold washed over me, and the darkness began to fade into shades of gray. I was no longer floating. I was suspended within a twisted nightmare of glimmering shadows, all blurred outlines and haunting silhouettes. They orbited around me as if celebrating my entrapment, and my pulse hammered in sync with the rhythm of their manic dance. The tapping morphed into a relentless scratching sound, and I realized it came from beyond a thick barrier, an unseen wall that separated me from whatever reality still existed. "Help," I gasped, but my voice was lost in the cacophony, consumed by the shadows swirling hungrily. Then, through the dimness, a face emerged. It was twisted, its features a grotesque amalgamation of human and beast, with hollow eyes that mirrored my dread. They blinked slowly, and a terrible grin stretched across its visage, revealing teeth that glinted like shards of glass. "You've made a choice, little one," it hissed, a damp breath spilling forth in a rancid cloud. "Let me go?" I shouted, my voice breaking in desperation. "I didn't choose this. I don't belong here." But the shadows roared in laughter, their voices a discordant symphony, weaving into the very fabric of the dark. "You belong to us now," the creature said, inching closer, its tongue lolling out to caress the tips of the air. "You're part of the game, the never-ending play. You must answer the call or join the ranks of the hopeless." My heart raced, wild and frantic, and I thrashed against my invisible confines. Attacks of chilling dread surged through me, sharp as the cold steel of a knife. This was the realm of the lost. I could feel my memories being siphoned, fragments of who I was fading away, leaving behind only echoes of laughter and tears. "Breathe," a voice intruded again, sweet like the briefest touch of sunlight, but tainted with urgency. "You have to wake up. You must fight." In that instant, I braced myself against the tide of despair, searching through the shadows for a hint of strength. My sister's face materialized again, vivid yet distant, her brow furrowed with concern. "Find me in waiting." It ignited something deep within me, a flicker of hope scorching through the shadows like a flame. I clenched my fists, feeling the urge to scream, to shatter this nightmare apart. All my memories, woven together, drew strength from my heart. I didn't belong among the lost. I had a life to claim, a sister to save. With a primal roar, I launched myself at the barrier, feeling the mass of darkness recoil, as if my defiance startled them. Behind me, the relentless creature snarled, spitting curses that curled around me in sinuous tendrils, and I felt the edges of my mind fray as the shadows clawed for my essence. I crashed against the wall. It buckled under the pressure, warping and fracturing like glass. A screech tore through the air, reverberating with the strength of sealed souls breaking free. I felt a rush of air. Freedom was within reach, but just as the darkness began to dissolve, a cold grip latched onto my ankle, dragging me back into the abyss. "You cannot escape," the creature howled, its voice a lingering cacophony of dread. "You belong to the game, Bree." I scrambled against the malevolent force, clawing at the earth, fighting to escape the icy tendrils wrapping around my leg. In that moment of rage and desperation, the vision of Ellie flared again, her face alight with fierce determination. "Find me." With one final roar, I hurled myself forward, feeling the last tether to the reality of light popping like a balloon. The truth ignited a surge of energy as I tore through the barrier with reckless abandon, blinded by the sudden brilliance of white that I stumbled through the portal, collapsing into the void of light. Yet it felt wrong, empty, almost lifeless. As I gasped and choked on the new air, I strained to hear Ellie's voice, but the silence was deafening. Struggling to focus, I lifted my head and realized I was no longer in the forest. Reality had folded back upon itself. Desperate for answers, I turned, but froze in horror. I was not alone. The faces of the lost surrounded me, their eyes wide with terror, mouths gaping in silent screams, as behind me, a familiar figure emerged from shadows. Annabelle, her doll-like smile glimmering wickedly. "You didn't think you could escape so easily, did you?" she whispered, the promise of unending horror dancing in her eyes. And then, from the darkness, the whispered voices began to chant my name. "Bree, Bree." The chanting crescendoed into a deafening roar, a cacophony that reverberated through my very bones. I staggered back, the faces around me blurring into an amalgamation of despair and unfulfilled cries. Their hollow expressions bore witness to countless souls lost, trapped in the limbo of this dark existence, yearning for salvation. "Help us! Help us!" they pleaded silently, their mouths moving in tormented unison, but no sound came forth. Their anguish sliced through my heart, an agonizing reminder that I was not just an outsider in their world, but a potential prisoner among them. Yet Annabelle's sinister grin held me captive as she advanced, gliding unnaturally across the ground, her doll-like body swaying like a marionette on invisible strings. "They're waiting for you, Bree. Just like I waited," she purred. "This is where dreams go to die, and you have the chance to join them." My breaths quickened, and dark thoughts curled around my mind like smoke. "No," I choked out, forcefully shoving the dread away. I had to find Ellie, to pull her back from whatever brink she was teetering on. But the shadows thickened as Annabelle's presence loomed larger, drawing the very darkness I had escaped back to me. "Your sister is close," she taunted, her voice slithering through the air like a serpent. "Do you feel that? The way she calls to you? It's more than mere blood. It's a connection that binds you both to this realm, and it will be your undoing. Stop," I shouted, spinning around to face the lost souls, seeking their shared energy. "You can fight. You don't have to stay trapped." The luminous eyes of the living shadows lit up with flickers of hope, like moths to a flame, but soon dimmed as Annabelle continued her taunt. "They are mine. They have given up on the light, on escape. They are part of the game too," she crooned, her smile widening as her fingers danced like marionette strings across her delicate face. The shadows reacted, swirling in tandem, amplifying the chill that gripped my throbbing heart. The ghostly echoes became a tempest, their voices intertwining with the whispers of despair until a murmur crescendoed into an anguished wail. "Help us!" they screamed in my mind, every heartache reflected in their spectral forms. Despite the terror gnawing at my core, I reached out to them, feeling their hopelessness claw at me, the touch of sorrow as real as a physical grasp. "Don't listen to her," I cried, my voice firm and resolute. "You have to push back against the darkness." Annabelle's laughter echoed icy and hollow, circling me like a predator. "Oh, sweet Bree, do you think your will can outshine eternity?" Every flicker of light in their hearts has been extinguished by despair. With a wave of her hand, the shadows flared dangerously, spiraling upward, shimmering with malice. Suddenly, the faces of the lost began to dissolve, their features blurring, twisting into horrid shapes as they screamed silently. "Bree, save us!" they mouthed, reaching for me, their fingers barely brushing the air before vanishing into the abyss. Despair shot through me sharply. From one moment to the next, they were gone, entrapped once more. No, I screamed, panic igniting my senses. I couldn't lose them too. Would not stand idle as they faded into nothingness. Yet Annabelle loomed closer, and I could feel the chilling gaze of the oncoming shadows weighing down on me. Another voice rang out, clearer than the rest, cutting through the murmurs of the lost. "Bree, remember Ellie." My sister's presence surged through the gloom, rekindling sparks of courage within me. I lunged forward, following the sound of her voice, the connection growing more vivid each moment. The shadows coiled tighter, yet something inside me ignited the will to fight for her. "Show me where she is. Tell me," I cried out. Annabelle recoiled, her malicious smile flipping into a snarl. "You're not meant to leave." As the shadows roared with fury, electricity crackled through the air, illuminating a path behind Annabelle, a door flickering with a soft, golden glow, the only hint of hope in this terror-stricken hellscape. I bolted toward it, heart racing. But just as fingers brushed the edge, a violent storm of shadows erupted, lashing out, wrapping around my wrists like serpents, anchoring me back. "You cannot escape her," Annabelle screeched, her eyes flaring with fury and rage as her doll-like composure cracked open at the seams. Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the air sharp, filled with desperation and terror. And it froze me in place, a chilling recognition striking deep. It was Ellie's voice, echoing from beyond the veil. "Help me, Bree. Please." With that, darkness surged around me, pulling me closer to the brink of despair as I frantically clawed for the light, the shadows threatening to engulf me whole. "No, Ellie," I screamed, fighting with every fragment of my being. But, in that very moment, the ground beneath me began to quiver, a bone-deep tremor shaking my resolve. The glow of the door pulsed fiercely for one final moment. And just as I felt the last tendrils of shadows begin to rip away from me, the ground split open, revealing an abyss beneath. And as I fell, the darkness laughing triumphantly, I could only hear one last sound, the haunting whisper of my sister reaching out to me, fading as I slipped into the unknown. Bree, and then, silence consumed me. I tumbled into the void, the weight of the abyss pulling at my consciousness. For a heartbeat, I drifted in that liquid shadow, the world above slipping away like a receding tide, and I was left weightless, suspended in infinite dark. An oppressive silence swirled around me, thick and choking, and I wondered if this was how true despair felt, an endless fall from grace with no hope of redemption. But then, a flicker broke through the nothingness. A dull glow emerged, expanding slowly, teasing the edges of my vision. I strained to see more clearly, and the light grew brighter, revealing the contours of a cavern. It was vast, yet suffocating, lined with jagged stones that oozed with a viscous darkness, as if the very walls of this place were alive and trying to consume me. Bree, a faint whisper danced through the air, echoing like a distant heartbeat. My heart leaped at the sound. It was Ellie's voice. Driven by desperation, I scrambled to the source, my breath coming in quick gasps. I was moving toward it, compelled forward by either fate or madness. "Ellie!" I cried out, my voice bouncing off the cavern walls in disjointed echoes. The glow pulsed again, revealing a narrow passage ahead, and I dashed down it, adrenaline surging through my veins like fire. But the further I ventured, the more the shadows seemed to gather, creeping closer with each step, their whispers growing into an ominous chorus. "You don't belong here," they warned, their tones slithering like serpents around me, tugging at my resolve. "Leave me alone," I screamed, but the shadows just laughed, a horrific sound that filled the air with a grotesque joy. "Join us, Bree. Join your sister. Are you willing to pay the price?" Suddenly, the light flickered and dimmed, revealing a figure standing at the end of the passage. My heart stopped. It was Ellie, but she looked different, hollowed out, eyes vacant and glossed over, as if her very essence had been stripped away, leaving behind a shell of despair. "Bree," she murmured, her lips twisting into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The tone of her voice struck fear deep within me. It echoed with the sorrow of countless souls lost in this wretched place. "What happened to you?" I gasped, struggling against the pull of the nearby shadows that clawed at my ankles, trying to drag me into their suffocating embrace. "You have to fight, Ellie. We can escape together." Her smile faded momentarily, replaced by a fleeting expression of sorrow. "There is no escape." But her eyes flickered with just a hint of the sister I had always known. "I wish I could have saved you." But a glimmer of clarity surged there, a reminder of the bond we once shared, a thread woven strong yet frayed after years apart. "And oh," I cried, pushing through the oppressive darkness, "I refuse to believe that. Are you willing to sacrifice everything?" She suddenly hissed, her face contorting as shadows danced along her body, wrapping around her like a shroud. "What if the price is your own soul?" In a surge of fear, I took a daring step forward. "I don't care. I won't let you go." I could feel the darkness inching closer, tendrils curling around my feet, and still, I pressed on, desperate to reach her. "Bree," she said, her voice trembling as the shadows clasped tighter around me, pulling me back. "You don't understand. To save me, you must let the darkness in." The walls of the cavern shook violently, and the unsettling whispers morphed into harsh screams, reverberating through the air. "Let her go?" they shrieked, their howls laced with a madness that left me gasping. "Ellie, please," I begged. "You can break free. We can fight this together." As my words hung in the air, the shadows recoiled momentarily, their grasp slackening for an instant. For just a heartbeat, the cavern became quieter. But then, as I reached out to Ellie, their grip returned with a vengeance, and the ground beneath us trembled violently as cracks snaked through the floor. A gaping chasm tore open right between us, a singular nothingness yawning beneath as the shadows shrieked in fury. I fought against the pull, yearning to bridge the gap to Ellie, to save her, but the darkness coiled tighter, dragging me towards the void. "Bree." She extended her hand, desperation igniting the dim light within her eyes. "Save yourself, no?" I screamed, reaching back, clawing at the remnants of hope. The chasm widened, swallowing her light, her laughter transforming into choked cries of sorrow that echoed through the cavern. "I will find you," I shouted one last time, feeling the shadows pull me deeper. And in that moment, I realized with heart-stopping horror that I wasn't just losing Ellie. I was being drawn into the very depths of their darkness, a darkness that craved my surrender. As the shadows enveloped me entirely, the last remnants of Ellie's form flickered away, swallowed whole by the churning dark. Then a voice spoke, smooth and sinister. "Welcome home, Bree." And with that, I let out a blood-curdling scream as the shadows closed around me, a cacophony of laughter mingling with my own terror, consuming me whole. The air grew heavier, suffocating, with an almost palpable darkness that wrapped around me like a shroud. I had succumbed, and my defiance, the flickering light of hope, had been extinguished, leaving nothing but the yawning void that filled me with despair. My body felt detached, a mere vessel floating through the nightmarish landscape, but deep within my core, a flicker of recognition sparked. I was still aware. Light erupted through the murky atmosphere, causing my surroundings to shift once more. I blinked away the remnants of shadows, yet they clawed at my vision, stalking me like a lion circling prey. It felt as though I stood in the eye of an unseen storm, listening, waiting in a dismal stillness before chaos broke loose. Slowly, the laughter faded, replaced by a whisper, of voice satin smooth, yet laced with venom. "You made it," it purred. I knew that voice. It was Annabelle, her presence tangible and sinister, weaving through my mind like silk. "Welcome to your new home." The mocking cadence rippled inside my skull, lacing doubt with resignation that I scanned my surroundings, half expecting remnants of the cavern we had shared. Yet I stood in a small, dimly lit room that resembled an intimate nightmare. The warped walls radiated an unsettling warmth. Cozy cushions sat against the walls like distorted memories, and a solitary wooden rocking chair swayed in the corner, slow and deliberate, as if beckoning me to come closer. The air was thick with an unsettling familiarity. "Close your eyes, Bree," Annabelle cooed, her voice sultry and inviting. "Let us show you." The gentle whispering encased me, filling my mind with visions both surreal and compelling. I felt the warmth of her hand on my shoulder, a vice grip laced with something sweet and sinister. My surroundings pulsed, and within moments, the warm embrace of the doll's enchantment enveloped me entirely. Images, whispers of memories I had locked away, cascaded through my mind. Me sister, the laughter of childhood, playful afternoons spent in the glow of the sun, dreams woven together until they turned dark, twisted, and morphed into sorrow. "Eleanor," I gasped, struggling against the flood of nostalgic pain. "They are waiting for you," Annabelle said, her tone dripping with false kindness. And then the room shifted again, unveiling echoes of torment. I was now in a dimly lit corridor, filled with doors, heavy, thick doors that concealed terrors over which I had no control. I felt their presence behind each one, souls trapped within their own nightmares, pleading, screaming. "You can help them, or join them," Annabelle offered, fangs just visible beneath her painted smile. "It's your choice now." Panic clawed at my insides. I lurched toward the nearest door, throwing it open. What awaited me was a tableau of chilling horrors, a room filled with lost children, their eyes overflowing with tears of despair, their hands reaching toward me as if begging for salvation. But their visages twisted, morphing into faces I recognized, faces of family and friends who had succumbed to despair, each one trapped behind invisible bars, caught in an eternal loop of suffering. The truth crashed upon me like a wave. Me stories had culminated in this moment to tether all those I loved to this malevolent place, a prison that relished in their anguish. "Please, I can save you," I cried, tears streaming down my face, the heaviness of regret pressing down like stone. The children began to fade, absorbed into the shadows, their cries slowly morphing into the apathetic laughter I had come to dread. I turned back to the doll, my heart pounding wildly, blood thrumming in my ears. "Help me," I shouted, fury igniting even amid despair. Annabelle's laughter echoed, rich and terrible, filling the space with a sense of heavy triumph. "Dear Bree," she purred, her presence regaling in delight, "you've discovered the truth, but you've yet to comprehend the power you've unleashed." She stepped closer, an alluring darkness swirling around her. With a sudden snap, darkness snapped back, and I felt it all around me as if it had a life of its own, creeping back into the crevices of my mind. Shadows loomed closer, forming tendrils that snaked around my skin, and I felt my will crumbling as despair seeped into my bones. "I can give you what you desire, the power to save them, to make them release you from this eternal torment," she hissed. My retort trembled, but the shadows began to dance, weaving in deeper within my psyche, whispering promises of power and control, dark and beautiful. You can be the savior. They echoed, a chorus that seemed to vibrate within the very marrow of my being. Join us, Annabelle whispered into my ear, her breath chilling, making my skin crawl. You are one of us now. You've always been. A choice loomed ahead: stand against this abyss of darkness or sink within it, surrendering to the lure of power that sought to engulf me entirely. But as the tendrils entwined tighter, something shattered inside. I gripped the walls of consciousness, fighting against the tide of despair. No, I screamed again, my voice finally rising above the cacophony. In that moment, I felt the flicker of another presence. Ellie. Fight, Bree. Her clear voice pierced through the shadows, summoning the light I thought forever lost. It ignited within me, the warmth I had forgotten, the love and bond forged in childhood that no darkness could sever. As the shadows writhed, I turned, my resolution hardening. I won't be a part of your game, I shouted, unexpected strength rushing through me, igniting liberating fire within the cage of shadows. The doll's laughter turned to a scream, shaking the very foundation of this twisted place. I lunged forward with newfound defiance, pushing away the grasping darkness that clung to my limbs. The doorknob glimmered before me, final chance. With a wild surge of ferocity, I sprinted toward it, feeling the shadows lose their grip behind me, their anguished howls growing distant. Desperate as I clutched the knob, the blows of darkness pulled back, their hold breaking as I flung the door open. Bright light flooded my senses, washing away the remnants of despair, and for one electrifying moment, I found peace in the radiance. But just as hope surged, darkness pierced the warmth, and then I saw her face, Annabelle, now twisted in rage, her fangs bared, the shadows writhing behind her like a tempest. You think you can escape? She snarled, and in that very instant, everything changed again. The door slammed shut, and the air grew heavy once more, wrapping around me like a spider's web, tainting hope with the echoes of a chilling promise. I spun on my heels, teeth gritted, ready to confront the specter of what lurked in shadows again. This isn't over, Bree, Annabelle declared, each syllable curling around the air like smoke. And as I regained my footing in this damaged reality, I couldn't shake the sensation the gnawing truth that freed me now would call upon me again. The laughter echoed faintly from the door, haunting. The shadows hadn't dissipated. They lingered, nipping at the edges of my consciousness, promising a day of reckoning I could not escape. Because in this unending cycle of games between light and dark, I hadn't understood until now the true horror wasn't in losing my own light, but in the knowledge that I had invited them all along. They had become a part of my psyche, entwined tightly with my being, whispering that I could never truly escape. And with that thought anchored in my heart, a chilling realization gripped me. I would always hear Annabelle's voice, a haunting melody promising I was one of them, forever caught in the play of shadows, destined to dance between the echoes of laughter and the cries of despair. The world held its breath as I stepped back into the abyss once more, Annabelle's sinister laughter trailing behind like a shadow, whispering sweetly to my weary soul. Let the games begin.